It's time for Saving Story Time. I'm going to do about $100 into the life of a creator, and then I'll do the story time that I've been promising for quite a while with the paint by sticker. Are you ready? Let's go. Welcome back to Ready Budget Go. My name is Drew, and on this channel we talk about household budgeting, saving money, and achieving our financial goals. So if any of those sound like something that you vibe with, please consider subscribing, hit the like button, and leave me a comment down below because I'd love to hear from you. So two things today. We're going to do more in the life of a creator, and we will then start on the paint by sticker. I am all done with General Greenback and the Frugality Force, and I'm also all done with Zodiac Save with the Stars. Those books might come back at some point in the future, but for now we're just going to continue in here, and we're going to see how far we can get. Now I'm going to put about $100 in here, as I said, and I don't know exactly where that will take us, because I'm going to start, as I always do, in the back with the Booty Bank, which is by Liz and Les. This is one of my favorite challenges in the book, and it is a big saver. So I've got the clip here because this is where we left off last time, but I always start with this one just because some of the numbers are so big. And I'm going to change things up a little bit this week. So I had been rolling and going around the board, but I've been around the board so many times, and then I was starting to fill in some of these numbers going backward here when I had to put a whole bunch extra into my Roth IRA last week. Oh, and that's another thing. I'm not working on my Roth IRA anymore because it's fully funded. We did that last week. So now all of the money that I save is going toward the big move, but I'm still putting $300 a week or thereabouts toward my goal. Okay, so what I'm going to do now with the Booty Bank is when I get to it on the first time, I'm going to do the biggest number. And when I come to it naturally, like when I'm going through the book, then I'll do the smallest number because there aren't all that many numbers left. And the smallest left is 8 and the highest left is 30. So for now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to mark off the 30 and I will save $30, but I'm going to do it in the reverse order that I said I was going to do. So we'll just X out the 30 here. And then we will swing around to the front. And as I do this, I realize I'm totally unprepared. I don't have my scratch tool out. I don't have the stickers out. I don't have the dice out. I'm just kind of winging it today. So let me grab the scratch tool here. This is an extra challenge that I added into the book. This is from Snow Gardener 307. She was the one who compiled this book from myself, her, and 24 other creators. And when I finished her challenge in here, because I had this extra one, I slipped it in instead. So I'm all done with the top here, so now I'm working on the bottom, and I am going to scratch here. And it looks like $4. Not really a whole lot of light here. Let me fix that. There we go. That's better. Okay. So get that scratched, vacuum up the shavings, and we'll put $4 in. Okay, whoops, 2 and 4. Next up, we have the Kiss My Hiney challenge, and for this one I need the stickers. So let's get those out. There are 2 sticker sheets that come with this book, and the Kiss My Hiney takes the lip stickers. So I'll set these aside. We'll put another $5 sticker here on Georgette somewhere. And this one, I think, is going to go... Oh, goodness. Well, how about right up here, kind of on her lower shoulder blade? So we'll save $5 for that. And we'll move on to the Birds and the Bees challenge. So this one is by Mischief Managed Budgets in Champagne's Corner. It's a collab within a collab. Oh, and if I didn't mention, this is by 307 Design Studio, Shannon, who is Marlene's sister-in-law. So Birds and the Bees, I had been rolling with this, but there's so few spaces left that I am just going to kind of go in order with what I have left. So the first thing is this $3. So I'm going to scratch that out. And I'm also going to get rid of these back 2s and back 4s because I'm not using a die anymore. And that pen does not like the glossy paper. Give me just one sec here. I'll use a Sharpie. There we go. Okay, so we're going to save $3, which means I'm going to put 17 back and take out another 20. 20, 10, 2, 5. Okay. And we'll move on. There's a whole bunch in here that I completed, so I just paper clipped them so I didn't have to keep flipping through them. Now we're in the 25 to Thrive. This is a habit tracker challenge, but I don't really use habit trackers, so I decided that the habit that I'm tracking is that every time I come to this page, I'm going to save $5 and check off a cloud. So that's what we'll do here. $5 going in. This one's complete. Now we're on the $50 plus dice roll. So this one I had been rolling, and if it was one that was available to me, then I would cross it off, and if not, I was using one of these other spots. But there's only 3 ones left here, and then I've got 1, 2, 3 more dice rolls. So I'm just going to take a 1 out and save $1. And I'm also going to save $1 here on Save to Sync. This is by Donna, powered by Creativity. This one is by pinkycloth.co. And this is the last one on Donna's challenge, so I will get out $1. And I also need to get out a challenge completed sticker. Let me see if I've got those handy here. Oh, I do. Okay. So that will go somewhere appropriate. I don't want to cover up too much here. How about right there? It'll cover up a little bit of the text, but that one's done. Now we're on to, is this the next page? Yes, the Rock and Roll Queen. And for this one, I'll need the dice. So let me get those out. If you order this book from Marlene, you do get a set of dice. You don't get to pick the color, but you get 7 dice. You get a D4, a D6, a D8, 2 D10s, a D12, and a D20. And for this one, we're working on the D6. So let me get that out. And we'll give it a roll here. I'll just roll it on the table. And we've got 6. So I'm going to get out a black Sharpie for this one, because this also doesn't like most pens, mostly because of the printing on it. Okay, so I will put back 4 and take out another 10. Actually, I'm going to put back 44 and take out a 50. So we're at 55. We've got $45 left to save. Now we're on to my challenge, Buster's Bangin' Burger Bar. And here at Buster's Bangin' Burger Bar, you get to make your own burger with the toppings of your choice. So this time we're on onion rings, and I do like onion rings on my burger. I don't have a brown Sharpie, so I'm going to use yellow for these onion rings. Just color them in here. And I'll save $1 for that. If we didn't want them on our burger, then we would cross this out and we would save $3 for wasting food. But I like onion rings on a burger. Okay. So $1 for that, and we'll move on to the next challenge, which is finished. So now we're on to counting sheep. This is by Budget with Ira, and we are on our last little sheep here on the sticker sheet. And this little sheep will go right here or right here. I think I'll put it up here. Okay. So $5 for this one, so I'll put back 5 and take out a 10. This sticker sheet is done. We get a challenge completed sticker here. Right like that. Okay. This one is done. So now we're on to Janelle Ray Budgets on her Deer in the Fog challenge. And this one I need my D20, because that's what I said I was rolling for this one. And I have only the roll and saves left. I've already done all the scratches. Give it a roll. And we got 9. So we'll take 11 back. Oops. Put in a 20. And I need Sharpie to record 9. I think this is the color I was using. There we go. Not a very pretty 9, but it's recorded. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 more times for that one. Now over here we're on Danny Craftco Budgets and her scratch and save challenge, the Mystical Forest. I think I've scratched all of the small ones, so I have only the 3 big ones left. And they're just big stickers. They're not necessarily big numbers. Like here was a 1. And some of the smaller stickers, like here was a 5. So let's scratch here and let's see what we get. $4. Apologies for all the shaking. Okay, so 2 and 4. Okay, and now we're back to the booty bank. So we're going to do the smallest one, which is going to be $8. Okay, so I will take 2 back and grab a 10. So we're up to $82, so I've got 18 left to go. Back to the front, and we're on Marlene's challenge again. So I'm going to scratch this present. I'm going to leave these 2 presents for the end. $5 for this little gift. Okay, we'll take out a 5. Next, we're back to Kiss My Hiney, so another $5 for Georgette. And we'll stick this one on her right cheek, right there. Okay, we'll take back 15 and put in a 20. 10, 5. There's a 20, so we're at 92. So $8 left to save. We're back to the birds and the bees. And we're going around, and we're going around, and we're going around here, $2. So I'm just going to use the red, cross that $2 off. Take out another 2. Okay, and we'll move right along. 25 to thrive. Another cloud, another $5. Okay, so we are at 99. 99. All right. So, need to save one more dollar. Boy, I wish I still had Donna's challenge left to do, but I'm just going to cross off another 1 here, and that will make an even $100 from the life of a creator this week. So I'm going to put back the 99. 579. We'll take out $100, and since I shouldn't have much to condense this week, I'm going to just total up what's in the envelope. So let me put the clip here on the Rock and Roll Queen. Okay. Close up the book. And we'll go to the envelope. Let's see how much is in the life of a creator this week. So in here we have 2,000, 100, 200, 300, 20, 40, 42, 43. $2,343. So not bad. I have used this money toward various goals. Some of it went to my emergency fund, some of it went to the blip fund, some of it went to the Roth IRA, and now some of it is going to the big move. If you've been following me on my weekly budget updates or my budget with me videos, then you'll know all about my goals and how I've been working on them in succession this year. So I'm going to put these away, the stickers for Georgette, and then I will get all set up with the storybook or the paint by sticker book, and I'll tell you a story about my earliest childhood memories and how that informed my opinions and beliefs about money. Here we are in the paint by sticker book, and I decided to just go in order of the different pieces that are in here, and I'm starting with its Egyptian themed one. I don't know if this is one of the easier ones or one of the harder ones, because for me, they're all difficult. I'm not that great with fine motor skills, so getting these stickers placed is going to be a tricky proposition. I did 50 stickers, and I decided that each sticker was going to be worth $2, so I'm going to save $100 toward the big move for this week, because I put down the 50 stickers, and it took me over 20 minutes. I don't know if that's typical or if I was moving slower, but with how precise I was trying to be with these, and not doing very well at it. That's just how long it took. But I'm not terribly worried about the quality of it. I think it is important to do things that challenge you, that aren't just the things that you're good at. So I say often on this channel that I'm not good at coloring, and I've just mentioned that my fine motor skills aren't fantastic, but I still do those things because I've learned to accept that they're not my strengths, but I want to keep pushing myself, challenging myself, I guess, to get better with it, or at least to continue to try, rather than to just give up. Plus, I kind of like the idea of this book. I think I mentioned that I found this book at the Seattle airport when I was coming back from a trip, and I flipped through it and I thought, I can make a savings challenge out of this. So that's what I decided to do. So, what I want to talk about this week are some of my earliest childhood memories when it comes to money. And for me, I come from a broken home. My parents separated when I was very young. They separated when I was 2, and the divorce was final when I was 4.5. So that divorce dragged on a good long while. I think, children are keen observers, or at least I was, and I think most children are. And so they will fill in the narrative of how the world works until they learn otherwise. And this was certainly true for me when it came to things like money. I think as adults, we're so used to the way the world works that we don't think about somebody coming into it cold the way a child does, where they have to learn, the basics of how modern life is constructed. When I was growing up as a young child in the 1980s, I remember asking my mother for something. I don't remember exactly what it was, but it was, something not extravagant, but something that I wanted. And she said that she didn't have the money for it. And I gave her this impatient look, and it was like, well, write a check. What do you mean you don't have money? Just write a check. Because I'd seen her do that for any number of things. I'd watched her write the rent check, and I watched her write checks at the grocery store and to pay bills, and any number of other things. It's like, well, if you don't have the money, just write a check. That's just what you do. And there was another instance where I said, write a check, and she said, well, they don't take checks. And it's like, well, then go to the cash machine. You don't have enough cash, there's a machine that dispenses it. Go get more. And it's the impatience that only a small child can have at having to explain what to a small child is the most basic of concepts to an adult who clearly doesn't have a clue in the child's eyes. And it's like, well, I've seen you do this before, why can't you just do that again? Not knowing why, not knowing how bank accounts work, why money is finite, this, that, and the other thing. So, I think the reaction that I remember getting from my mom was that it was kind of cute, right? Like you get that patronizing smile, like, oh, sweet summer child, not knowing how the world works. But when that isn't followed up with, actually, honey, I can't write a check because there isn't enough money in my bank account to cover the check, and then explaining what that means to the satisfaction of the curiosity of a child, which is infinite, then, it leads to all these kind of wrong assumptions about how the world works. And I get it to a certain extent that it is exhausting trying to keep up with the curiosity of a child. But on the other hand, when you don't fill in the blanks for them, children will do that on their own, usually with the wrong idea. And it can take months or even years for those ideas to go away. One of the other people that I follow on YouTube was talking about how when she was growing up, her father said, you can't run the dishwasher more than once a day. And she grew up, well into adulthood, believing that there was some magical law that you could not run a dishwasher more than once a day, no matter how many dishes piled up in the sink. And if you had already run the dishwasher, you just have to wash them by hand, no matter how many there are. And it wasn't until she was in her early 50s maybe late 40s, but after the death of her father, that she thought, wait a minute, if I'm baking up a storm and I'm producing, dirty dishes left and right, I absolutely can run the dishwasher more than twice a day. The world's not going to end. The dishwasher police aren't going to come to the door. So that's another example of the magical thinking, that kind of takes hold in childhood. And unless you have something that changes that narrative, those habits can last, or those ideas can last for decades. So, as I mentioned, my parents divorced. I was raised by my mom, alone. So my father was not in my life. I saw him for the last time in about 1989 or 1990. He is deceased. He died last year. So I don't, both of my parents are deceased. So I am an only, well, I thought I was an only child. If you've been following me for a while, then you know that turned out not to be the case. I do have a half brother that I just learned about this year within the last few months. So I'm coping with that. But, as far as childhood goes, I was raised as an only child. And my mom had a lot of shame about money. And I think that primarily came from the divorce. She never said how much she made or what things cost. So I had no idea where money came from, really, or where it went. I had no perspective on that. I had to kind of fill in those blanks on my own once I got to an age where I was earning my own money and spending my own money. So I was really raised as a financially illiterate child. I had no concept of money. I think a lot of people will say the same thing. One of the things that I hear a lot from adults who say they can't manage their money is they didn't learn how to do it in school. And I think, okay, but nobody did. So you either learned it from home, from observing your parents or your guardians or whoever was raising you, or you figured it out on your own. And I think the same is true in a lot of other areas of life. There's hobbies that I have as an adult that I wasn't taught how to do in school. I figured it out on my own. So I don't use that as an excuse that I didn't get a financial education in school. What I say is I missed the financial education at home because that is more impactful. Children value what you do and observing what you do hundreds of times more than what you say as a parent, right? So I would observe what my mother did, writing checks for groceries. No idea where that money came from. No idea that checks were related to money. It was just something you did, and you filled out this piece of paper, and you got to take home your cart full of groceries. So I would say, for me, being financially illiterate, I don't necessarily blame the school system for that. Sure, they could have, educated us somewhat, but really it was the fact that I didn't get it at home that I think was more impactful. And those concepts are really hard to absorb from books, especially for young children, on how money works and earning a living, paying taxes, paying bills, buying groceries, providing for all of the things that keep body and soul together. It doesn't come, it doesn't, it's not something you can really learn from a book at a young age. But observation, especially watching your parents do the same thing over and over and over again, forms ideas in your mind about money, good, bad, or indifferent. And those really take hold. And it can take, if those ideas are wrong, which some of them are, they're going to be, unless your parents are really on the ball, it takes a really long time to dislodge those and to figure out the way that money really works and how you should be managing it. So, um, I guess I'll talk a little bit more about money in early childhood from the standpoint of not really having any. So I grew up middle class, meaning I had a middle class upbringing, but realistically, we were hanging on by the to the cliff edge by our fingernails, and I didn't know it. Because again, my mom shielded me from all of this. So when my parents divorced, the state that I grew up in, Washington State, is a community property state. You find that more out west than you do out east. So Washington, California, I think Idaho and Nevada are also community property states. I don't think Oregon is. And there's some others in the West that are also community property states. And what that means is that all of the everything that is earned and all of the debt that is accrued during a marriage belong equally to both parties. So if there is a divorce, a dissolution of marriage, each person gets half the money and they each get half the debt. That's generally how it works. There are ways to negotiate around that. Certainly, if both parties agree, it can be overcome. But generally, in a divorce, getting both parties to agree on just about anything is pretty difficult. So, when my parents split up, they owned a lot of property. And the reason they owned a lot of property is because my dad was in the trades. He was a roofer, but he also knew how to do framing, electrical, plumbing, kind of the sheetrock, the whole works, everything except foundation. I don't think he could pour a foundation. I think he would have to hire that out. But he built houses from the ground up, with all of the framing and electrical and plumbing, and of course the roof. So they owned all these properties. Some of them were rental properties, some of them were new builds that he was working on, some were just vacant lots, and some of the rentals were vacant. So it was really kind of a patchwork. And then, of course, there was the family home that we lived in. So when my parents split up, my dad stopped making the payments. My mom couldn't make the payments on her own, on her salary. So one by one, those properties started to fall into foreclosure. And that was really damaging, not just from a financial perspective and, like a credit perspective, because I think this is before the days of credit scoring. This would have been in the mid 1980s. So, it wasn't like your FICO score took a hit, but at the same time, when you applied for new credit, the creditor would look at your whole credit report and decide if you were worthy or not, and how much of an interest rate you were going to have to pay. And of course, interest rates back then were just sky high. So, and that was the prime rate. The prime rate is sky high. So if you're a poor credit risk, you're paying astronomical rates. Well, my parents split up. My mom and I had to move to a different county, the county where she worked as opposed to the county where she lived, because she had a 2-hour commute each way. And she said, I'm not doing this anymore. And, while I would have loved to have stayed closer to where I was born, I understand from her perspective. I mean, there was no point in wanting to do a 2-hour commute, or in doing a 2-hour commute. It just wasn't workable with being a single parent of a very small child. So we moved, and, when back then, if you were not a good credit risk, well, you paid first and last month's rent plus a giant deposit, and and plus the moving expenses. And it was plus we had to buy all new furniture, because my dad took all the furniture and the washer dryer and every single plate, glass, and piece of flatware in the kitchen, and the telephone. And I mean, he picked it clean out of the marital home. So we were starting from scratch. So all the moving costs plus having to furnish a new house, and I was just about out of my crib, so I had to get a bed. So it was a big outlay of money, and all of that went on credit cards. My mom didn't have any money between paying to move us and paying her divorce lawyer and just the costs of living. So, I didn't really understand that we didn't have any money, because we had all the things that money would provide. I mean, I didn't see my life as any different from any of our neighbors, and we lived in a regular suburb. It was a tract house. So at the time we moved in, it was about 35 years old, built in the early 50s. So it wasn't anything special, but it was a house that we rented. So we went from a house that we owned to a house that we rented, and then when that became unaffordable, then we moved into a duplex. And when that became untenable, then we moved into an apartment, and then a worse apartment. So we kind of kept trading down as the years went on. And I realized that it was because my mother was having to pay so much in interest just to service the debt that she had taken on. So, I didn't know that until I was much older. At the time that I was young, it was just, well, there's food on the table and I've got a roof over my head. And so, I didn't know how close we were to the edge. And I also didn't know what was going to happen if the house of cards collapsed. And I think that was probably something my mom worried about, but tried not to dwell on because she never, I never asked. To the day she died, I never asked. But knowing what I know now, I realize how terrifying that must have been, especially being responsible for a small child. So I think, in terms of my mother's financial education, I don't think she was clueless, but I think she was trapped by circumstances. I mean, she had to buy furniture. We had to have a washer dryer. We couldn't just beat our clothes against a rock. We had to have those things. So, um, getting into debt like that and then taking decades literally to get back out of it because the interest rates were so crushing, and not really knowing what else to do. I think, if I could go back in time to 1987, let's just say, I would tell my mom to just declare bankruptcy because that probably would have been the best option. But there is such a stigma against bankruptcy, back then as today. But had she done that, I think my later childhood into my high school years would have been a lot better. Because by 1994, it would have been gone off of her credit report, and in 1994, I was in middle school. So, um, I wish that had been the path that she took, but I think she had a real strong sense of responsibility, just as most of us do, to paying off the debt that she had taken on because she felt it was her duty. And so I'm proud of her in a way for that, but at the same time, I think our circumstances could have been a lot easier had she just filed for bankruptcy. So going back to my dad, I didn't see him all that much. He barely paid any child support. My birthday's in January, and he would send $100 in December and $100 in January. $100 in December for Christmas, and then $100 in January for my birthday, and that was really it. It was rare for my mom to get a support check at any other point. Again, my dad was in the trade, so he could work under the table, and that money was not traceable. And because it wasn't traceable, it also wasn't enforceable. So support enforcement would find him because he moved a lot. They would find him and they would say, all right, show me your pay stubs. And he'd say, well, I don't have any pay stubs. Well, how do you support yourself? Well, my wife supports us. Of course, he was working. But I never met, I met one of my stepmothers. There were four in total. I've only met one. But that was always the story, and they couldn't garnish her wages. So, it was just a really difficult upbringing. Um, one of the attitudes that I picked up from my mom, because I think the attitude around money, almost more than the knowledge, is what the children will pick up on. And what I got from my mom is one of hopelessness. It's like, I'm in debt. I'll always be in debt. I'm never going to be in the clear. This is just kind of the way things are. And she did get out of debt a couple of times, but she got right back into it because she didn't really know by that point what it was like not to have debt. So in a way, it became almost security in a way. The insecurity became the security. It's like, okay, I'm out of debt. Now what do I do? And not really knowing how to navigate that or what to do next. So it's just, well, let's go right back into debt again. And I don't think she did it with that much forethought. But at the same time, it's like, okay, I'm out of debt. Now what do I want? I'm going to go get it. That's going to cost money. I'll just take on debt again. I got out once. I can do it again. And so that cycle just kind of repeated itself. And that visited itself upon me when I reached adulthood. And I'll talk about that in another week. But, once that hope is gone, it's very, very hard to get it back. And, you get so deep in the hole sometimes that you just can't see daylight. And I think that's where my mom kind of ended up, because at the end of her life, she was back in the hole again. and she died insolvent. And I wish there was something that I could have done to help with that, but short of winning the lottery, I don't think there was anything that I could have done. So, um, so that's kind of my early childhood. Next week, I'll talk more about adolescence, getting my first job, earning my first paycheck, and how that worked. But for now, I'll leave you with those thoughts. And thank you so much for watching or for listening if you have just been listening. So I appreciate everyone who joins me every week on this financial quest that I'm on to reach my big ambitions in life. So if you enjoyed the video, please leave it a thumbs up. Leave me a comment down below so that I know you were here. Subscribe if you haven't already. And until I see you in the next one, take care.